"You're just someone's widow," the manager had muttered under his breath, loud enough for the checkout line to hear. Everyone's got a sob story these days. He hadn't looked up, hadn't seen the way her hand trembled as she clutched the fraying handle of her grocery tote, hadn't seen the small pin on her coat, tarnished brass, shaped like folded flags, because to him, she was just an old woman fumbling with expired coupons and moving too slowly. But what he didn't see would soon cost him everything. Because someone else in that store did notice. Someone who knew exactly who Eileen Warren was. And by the end of the day, so would everyone else. If you agree that no one should ever have to earn basic respect, especially not the widow of a man who gave his life to protect ours, like and subscribe. These stories deserve to be remembered. Tuesday morning hadn't asked for attention. It slipped in quietly, sun bleeding soft through the clouded windows of Clearbrook Market, the kind of place with 3 checkout counters and 2 working. Eileen Warren stepped through the automatic doors like she always did, measured steps, flat shoes, coat sleeves folded up once at the wrists. Her shopping list was handwritten in cursive, tucked into the same brown leather wallet she'd carried since 1989. No one greeted her. No one ever did. She didn't expect it. The employees at this store were young, tired, and always moving too fast. But she still smiled, soft at the edges, to everyone she passed. Her wedding band was still on her hand, glinting just slightly when she reached for her cart. It clinked once against the handle before she started her slow walk toward aisle 6, coffee and canned goods. She preferred black roast, the kind Billy used to brew before sunrise back when he still had strength in his hands. It had been 5 years since the funeral, but Eileen still talked to him every morning. Her lips barely moved, just small murmurs between cereal boxes and jars of pickles, as if the world didn't need to know. She stopped in front of the top shelf, leaned upward, and tried to tip the coffee can toward her. It slipped once. She stepped back. Before she could try again, a voice behind her snapped through the aisle. "Need a hand, Grandma?" It wasn't kind. The tone sharpened the word like a needle. She turned slowly and found Kyle, the assistant manager in his corporate red polo, badge lopsided, gum in his mouth, smirking like he thought he was clever. "They really should stock those lower," she offered gently. He rolled his eyes, grabbed the can with a flourish, and dropped it in her cart. "You're welcome," he muttered, already walking off. She didn't respond. She never liked confrontations. Just kept moving down the aisle, pretending her hands weren't shaking. 10 minutes later, she stood at the register, her small cart lined with soup, tea, bread, and a single bouquet of discounted carnations. Her fingers searched her purse for the veteran spouse discount voucher, one the regional military office had mailed her last month. It took her a moment. The man behind the counter, Kyle again, sighed dramatically. "Ma'am, this one's expired," he said, holding it up like evidence. "You can't just bring in anything with a flag on it and expect a deal." The woman behind Eileen shifted impatiently. A teenage bagger tried not to look. Kyle didn't lower his voice. "We get this kind of thing all the time," he added. "People playing the sympathy card." Eileen said nothing, just reached for her wallet and paid full price. The pin on her coat slipped slightly as she lifted the bag. It caught Kyle's eye for a moment. Folded flag design, brass edge, Department of Defense issued. But he looked away. "You have a nice day," he said with the kind of smile that said he didn't mean it. She didn't correct him. Didn't tell him her husband had been buried at Arlington. Didn't tell him what it meant to watch a folded flag handed to your trembling lap by white-gloved hands. She just walked slowly to the bench outside the exit doors, eased herself down, and waited for the shuttle bus that came every half hour. Inside the store, a younger cashier named B stood frozen behind register 2, her hands still hovering over a loaf of bread. She had watched the whole thing. Her stomach was a tight knot. She glanced at Kyle, who was laughing now with another employee. "They're all like that," he said. "Think the world owes them something." B said nothing. But one of the shoppers in the next aisle over had also seen. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as Kyle turned his back to joke about another sad war story. The man pulled out his phone, typed something fast, and hit send. 6 words. "She's here." It happened again. Outside, Eileen sat quietly, her hand resting on her lap, her thumb running circles around the edge of her wedding band. The carnations rustled in the breeze. Her bus was 7 minutes away. But justice? Justice was already on its way. And by the time it arrived, Clearbrook Market would never be the same. The call didn't ring twice, because men like Colonel David Harper didn't need time to think when it came to people like Eileen Warren. He'd served under her husband, Master Sergeant Bill Warren, in Kandahar and again in Helmand, and he could still hear the man's voice echo through dust storms and field tents, commanding without shouting, teaching without ever raising a hand. When the message came through, "She's here," it happened again. Harper was already reaching for his uniform jacket, not because Eileen asked for help. She never had, but because this time, someone had finally seen. 37 minutes after Eileen had sat quietly on the bench outside Clearbrook Market, the rhythm of the store began to shift. It started subtly, BEA's hands trembling as she tried to bag apples without bruising them, an uneasy murmur in aisle 3, the manager glancing over the camera feed on a monitor behind the counter with growing confusion. Then the black SUV pulled into the loading zone. Not rushed, not loud, just deliberate, its matte body like a moving silence. When the doors opened, Colonel Harper stepped out in full dress uniform, pressed charcoal fabric, silver trim sharp as scripture, rows of ribbons across his chest that told more story than words ever could. 2 officers followed behind, both civilian dressed but unmistakably military in the way they stood, and how they walked like they'd cleared buildings together. The automatic doors whooshed open, and suddenly, the store had gravity. Not the kind that weighs down, but the kind that demands stillness. Colonel Harper didn't speak at first. He walked past the carts, past the bakery displays, until he stood directly in front of the service desk, where Kyle was cracking a joke to the assistant stock lead. "Are you the one who mocked Master Sergeant Warren's widow over a coupon?" Harper asked, calm as a calm before a detonation. Kyle blinked, confused, his brain catching up slower than his smirk fading. I didn't know she was anyone. That," Harper said, "was your first mistake. And your last." Kyle opened his mouth again, but the store manager had already arrived from the back, pale, glancing between Harper and the men beside him. "We're not looking for a scene," she stammered. "Actually," Harper said, "you already had one. We're here for the consequence." He placed a manila folder on the counter. Inside, a copy of the regional contract between Clearbrook Market and the Central Veterans Alliance. On the final page, highlighted and initialed, a clause: "Zero tolerance for disrespect toward active, former, or familial military members within a partnered business. Violation voids agreement." The store manager scanned it with trembling fingers. Her voice dropped. "Please, this isn't our brand. This isn't who we are." "It's exactly who you are," said B quietly from checkout lane 2. All eyes turned to her. She was still holding a receipt in one hand, frozen mid-transaction. Her voice cracked, but she didn't back down. He humiliated her. Loud. On purpose. In front of everyone. "That's who you were today." Kyle turned sharply. "You don't know what happened. You threw her pin into the bag," B said, eyes narrowed now, like it was trash. The weight of her voice hit harder than Harper's. Around the store, shoppers had stopped browsing. Some clutched baskets. Some held phones at their sides. No one spoke. And outside the glass, Eileen still sat on the bench, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing in particular. The store manager didn't look at Kyle. She didn't have to. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her keyring, and held it toward him. "Hand me your badge," she said. "Now." Kyle looked stunned. "You can't be serious. You've embarrassed this company, this town, and every decent person in this building," she snapped. "Badge. Now." He peeled it off slowly, the metal clip catching once on the fabric. He placed it on the counter like it might bite him. And just like that, he wasn't an employee anymore, just a man in a red polo with no name. Harper didn't look at him again. Instead, he turned and walked toward the exit. Bea stepped out from her register, heart pounding in her chest, and followed. The automatic doors opened, letting in the quiet wind of a spring afternoon. Eileen was still sitting, her shopping bag tucked at her feet. Harper stopped a few feet away, removed his hat, and offered the kind of salute that isn't practiced, only earned. "Mrs. Warren," he said softly. "We heard what happened." She looked up slowly, recognition flickering in her eyes. Not for the uniform, but for the man. "David Harper," she said, voice thin but warm. "I thought you were stationed in D.C. "I was," he nodded. "But I go where the important people are." Her lips curled at that, just slightly. Harper crouched to eye level, his knees protesting with the quiet groan of age. "He was the best of us, ma'am," he said. "And I'm sorry it took this long for someone to remind them." From inside the store, Bea stepped forward with something in her hands. It was Eileen's receipt, fully refunded. And beneath it, a hand-penned note. "On behalf of the staff who saw too late, thank you." Eileen took it gently. Her hand brushed Bea's for just a moment, and Bea felt something she couldn't name, like touching memory. Harper stood again and turned to the staff gathering near the glass. "This is the cost of forgetting," he said quietly. "Not dollars, not contracts, dignity, and you only get one chance to keep it." Then he walked Eileen to the SUV, not rushed, not formal, just beside her, like someone who understood what it meant to walk slowly but carry weight. Inside the store, the plaque that had hung above the staff training room, "Service with a Smile," felt suddenly too small, too cheap. Because now they understood. Service didn't start with a smile. It started with respect. And today, they almost lost both. The bench outside Clearbrook Market would never be just a bench again. Not after what happened. Not after what followed. Eileen Warren didn't ask for recognition. Never had. Not even when her husband's casket was carried between rows of saluting soldiers under skies too blue for grief. But the world has a way of catching up, eventually. The footage, grainy, recorded on someone's phone, circulated faster than anyone expected. Not of the mockery, not even of the firing, but of that quiet salute on the sidewalk. A colonel in full dress uniform, a widow sitting beneath a plastic grocery store awning, carnations in her lap, her hand rising slowly to return it. No words, just a gesture. That was the moment that spread. That was the clip the regional news aired. That was the spark that reached beyond the town. Within days, the grocery chain's corporate office issued a public apology, not canned or hollow, but read aloud by the CEO himself in front of a live press conference. "We forgot who our communities are built around," he said, voice catching. "And today, Mrs. Warren reminded us with more grace than we deserved." He paused. "Starting this year, on Veterans Day, all of our locations will observe a moment of silence at 11:11 a.m., and every widow of a fallen service member will shop for free. Permanently." The crowd didn't cheer. They stood. Quiet. Like the silence meant something now. Back in Clearbrook, a brass plaque was quietly installed on the stone bench where Eileen had waited. It didn't mention the manager, or the coupons, or the confrontation. It simply read, "In honor of Eileen Warren, for carrying the weight of a flag folded in silence." Beneath that, a quote from her late husband's journal, given to the store by Colonel Harper: "Respect isn't earned through war. It's remembered in how we treat the people who waited for us to come home." Every day since, someone has left a flower on that bench. A red carnation, usually. Sometimes a single white rose. No one's sure who started it. Some say it was Bea, others say it was the colonel. Doesn't matter. What mattered is that people remembered. Employees began treating the elderly differently, not just Eileen, but all of them. They walked groceries to cars, opened extra lanes for slow-moving hands, stopped sighing at wrinkled coupons and started seeing the person holding them. A small change, maybe, but small changes are how legacies begin. Bea, now promoted to floor supervisor, keeps a pin on her lanyard. Not her own. Eileen's. Given to her one quiet morning, folded in a velvet box, with just 6 words whispered as it passed from one hand to another. "He would have liked how you stood." As for Eileen, she still shops every Tuesday. Still wears her coat, still carries her list in that same old wallet. But now, when she enters Clearbrook Market, something subtle happens. Registers go quiet for a moment. Heads nod. Smiles appear without being asked for. It isn't a performance. It's something more enduring. One Tuesday, as she reached for her usual coffee tin, a teenage boy appeared silently beside her and lifted it down. He didn't say much, just placed it in her cart and added, "My uncle served with your husband. He used to tell me stories." Eileen blinked back something behind her eyes, then smiled. "He was a good man," she said softly. The boy nodded. "So are you." That day, when she walked past the plaque and sat for a moment on the bench before catching her bus, she rested a fresh carnation beside the dedication. Then she opened her wallet and pulled out something folded carefully behind her coupons, a letter. The original one. The one her husband had written to her from overseas, where he ended with, "If I don't come home, promise me you'll still go out on Tuesdays, and be kind, even to the ones who forget why they should be." She had. She would. And now, the town remembered. Not because she demanded it, but because she never did. Because the truest dignity doesn't shout. It stands in silence. It waits at a grocery checkout line. It folds flags into trembling laps. And sometimes, just sometimes, it changes the world from a plastic bench outside a store. One respectful nod. One returned salute. One small Tuesday at a time.